It's tempting to compare George Steele to the comic book Man of Steel. They're both tall and square-shouldered, both have boyish faces, and they share a mission to rescue a damsel in distress. By all accounts, the New York City Opera was in crisis when Mr. Steele signed on as its new general manager and artistic director last January. It was beset by financial problems and wrangling with its employee unions, and it had to suspend performances while its theater in Lincoln Center was being renovated. But next week, under Mr. Steele's direction, the company will launch a new, if somewhat abbreviated, season of performances in its refurbished home at Lincoln Center. And he's here now to talk about that upcoming season and the challenges that lie ahead. Welcome to our show.
Great to be here.
Let's talk about what's planned for next week. The opening gala on Thursday will feature American Voices, a program of songs from American operas and musicals. Why did you choose to open with choral performance rather than an opera?
Well, it was such a special occasion that we've just renovated the house. We spent $107 million refurbishing the place, and we wanted to show off everything that it can do, and we wanted to celebrate everything that New York City Opera is. And one of the great things that New York City Opera has done from the very beginning is to champion young American singers and American composers. And so we're having an evening that's all American music, music theater, opera, and also a visit from our friends at New York City Ballet.
Mm-hmm. And will there be any famous names among the singers?
Plenty of famous names. I mean, some of the great New York City Opera singers of all time. Sam Raimi will be there, Joyce DiDonato, Anna Christie, our own house divas, Amy Burton and Lauren Flanagan, some wonderful young singers. It's going to be a big show.
And Lauren Flanagan will be in the season's first opera, won't she?
That's right. 2 nights later, she's singing the title role in Hugo Weisskell's Esther, which we're reviving for the first time since we gave the world premiere in 1993.
Well, why now? Why not when Purim, during the
why not during Purim?
The Purim holiday season.
Yeah, I hear that from everybody I talked to about Esther. Well, we thought about Purim, but A, we're not in session during Purim this year, and B, I wanted to open my tenure at New York City Opera with a 20th century American opera, and it didn't take me very long to pick this glorious score, which I was actually thinking about for years before I came to New York City Opera.
Well, it did get great reviews when it opened, and yet new operas do have a problem being performed, don't they?
Yeah, it's. I mean, there aren't that many new works that get performed, and of course, there's a famous stigma about second performances. It's hard to get great works back, but that really didn't affect my thinking. It was really that the music was so incredibly wonderful. Even if this were the third performance, I would have the same feeling about it. It's one of the great American works of the 20th century.
And Lauren Flanagan sang the lead role in the original production?
In 1993, she credits it with really launching her. It was a big breakthrough moment for her. She says as a young woman, she said yes to this role without really looking at it closely, and it was a real bear. And this time, she said yes to it without remembering too much how difficult it was. But she's, in fact, fantastic. She sounds wonderful in it, and the whole cast is incredible. It's just a beautiful
paired
score.
her with the original director, too.
Chris Matteliano came back. It is the same production, and so we're happy to have Chris back directing it. One of the things that's not the same is in 1993, it was all old-school, really heavy-duty projectors. There are a lot of projections in the piece, and that's all been digitized now, so it looks very crisp and delicious.
Yeah, were you able to see the first performance?
In 93, I did not see it. I've only ever heard the piece and now seen it coming to the stage during rehearsal.
By the way, Lauren Flanagan will be a guest on Soundcheck tomorrow. The show comes on our FM side at 2 o'clock every weekday afternoon. Some people doubted that you'd be able to pull together an opera season on such short notice. You only started in the job, 8 months ago?
February 2nd.
Wow. Just putting together a new production of an opera is supposedly 4 years in the making, isn't it?
Wow. Is that true? Oops.
That's what they say.
Well,
well, of course, in the case of Esther, this is something that's been done before, but it hasn't been done at New York City Opera for 16 years.
And it hasn't been done anywhere for 16 years. That's the extraordinary thing about Esther. Well, yeah, I took over February 2nd. There were no singers hired for the season, and there were no operas programmed for the season. So it was a big challenge, but a really exciting one to get the staff together and to put together the season in very short order and to find pieces that represented the essential New York City Opera.
So when your predecessor, Gerald Motte, suddenly quit last fall, he left you nothing in place?
Well, he had some plans that he had moved forward on in varying degrees, but those were all projects which had been abandoned because they all added up to way more money than the opera had.
And that was part of the problem.
As I understand
the reason
it,
he quit, he just felt that there wasn't enough money for him to do the job he wanted to do.
Basically, yes, exactly. That's essentially true. He imagined a much more expensive season than the opera had ever had, and it became clear to everybody that wasn't possible.
Well, that would also suggest that he had something that would in mind that would be similar to what the Metropolitan Opera does. What are the differences between the two and their missions in your mind?
The Metropolitan Opera and us?
Yeah. First of all, do you see yourselves as Peter Gelb was on the show recently. Do you see yourselves as collegial, or are you rivals?
Oh, well, I mean, I suppose in some sense we're rivals. Peter's a terrific guy. I like him a lot personally, and of course I'm a huge fan of what he's doing across the plaza. But our two companies have had distinct identities for certainly as long as ours has been around. The Met's been around longer than New York City Opera, and New York City Opera was founded in many ways as an alternative to the Met. And I think when it's been its most successful, it's been crystal clear to the public the difference between the two places. We have, for instance, always championed young American singers. That's been a part of our mission. We've championed new repertoire. We gave our first American world premiere, I think in 1948, William Grant Still's Troubled Island. We are historically the company that does crazy new music for the first time in New York City. So Die Soldaten that people saw last summer at Lincoln Center Festival, we did 10 years ago. And Moses und Aaron, I think we were 15 years before the Met. And a host of major 20th century scores, Love of Three Oranges. I could go on and on and on. We were the first company in the United States to have super titles, so you knew what the heck people were singing about. So all these kinds of, not only in terms of repertoire, but in terms of outreach to the public, which is one of the reasons Fiorello LaGuardia, as mayor, founded the company, was to create what he called the People's Opera. And we have put affordable tickets as a number one part of our mission from the earliest days. So a quarter of the tickets we're selling next season are $25 or less.